John?
Over here.
Why are you standing in the shadows?
Got used to it, I guess.
Are you having second thoughts about, well, about all this?
Me? No. I passed second thoughts days ago. I'm up to 14 now. I'm just not sure if I'm cut out to be a politician, Delenn. I don't want to spend my time doing ceremonial things, opening shopping malls, giving medals to people I don't like, pardoning a turkey.
Sorry?
Thanksgiving. It's a big holiday back home. People celebrate by eating turkeys. But by tradition, one turkey always gets pardoned.
It says much about your species that you have based an entire holiday on deciding not to kill something for a change.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Grey Council.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast, part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. We're a group of newbies watching Babylon 5 for the very first time, and a group of first ones who are watching Babylon 5 for the umpteenth time. And we are very close to the end of this thing, and we're now looking at the latest Babylon 5 movie that only came out 1 year ago, and that is The Road Home. I'm Scott, and with me is...
Mike,
Nicole,
Justin,
Emily,
Kevin,
and Jessi.
Fucking Jessi.
Fucking Jessi.
Jessi.
Before we get started, a big thank you to everyone who has joined us for over 2 years now as we've been going down this road. We are the number 11th TV review podcast in Finland, so thanks for that.
Woo!
Also, thank you to everyone who does like, subscribe, and follow, leaves reviews, and does all of that to help the show grow. We did get a tweet. I refuse to call it X. We got a tweet from a different Scott that I wanted to read in lieu of a review this week. It says, Grey 17 podcast. I saw that the gang is getting close to the recording of Sleeping in Light, the episode, though I understand the movies are coming first. I gave myself permission to catch up and finally rewatch the finale since my wife passed. Interesting that it was just before our 20th anniversary. It hit me about how I expected it to, although the last words between Sheridan and Delenn hit me much, much harder than I expected. To those who have gone before us, and I say, in memory, may they stay still bright. So thank you, Scott, for joining us on this journey, and we appreciate your support. So you can leave us a review on Apple, on Audible, on Spotify, or you can shoot us over a message on our social medias where links for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are down below as well. And then we also have our Patreon. So if you can join us over there, it really does help the show grow. And it will buy us booze next week when we all sit down and watch Sleeping in Light. Along with Jessie's excited about that one. And then thank you to our great council members, the producers that are listed down below, who provide the best donation every single month. And that really does help us. We appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right into The Road Home. A little bit of backstory on this. When we started recording this podcast, this did not exist. We had heard rumors over the course of a couple years that there was something, a special project that JMS had been working on. And it was announced a little over a year ago that this project was coming out from Warner Brothers Animated, and that it was a full feature-length movie dealing with a part of the timeline that, as we are right now, it takes place right before Sleeping in Light and right after Objects at Rest. So we're talking about it here today. And as you probably heard on this show last week and a year ago, we did talk about this episode with our first ones as well as the League of Non-Aligned Podcast folks when it first came out. But the newbies have not seen this until this week or the last 2 weeks when they watched it. So the newbies have their initial reactions, and this will be the first time they talk about it. So the first ones are probably going to step back a little bit more because you've already heard where we feel this episode hit or miss. And then also because this is literally the last piece of Babylon 5 media to come out, at least for now, we probably won't have a Beyond the Rim because there's no real need for questions and predictions because this is it. So let's jump over to Nicole for a synopsis.
John Sheridan unexpectedly finds himself transported through multiple timelines and alternate realities in a quest to find his way back home. Along the way, he reunites with some familiar faces while discovering cosmic new revelations about history, purpose, and the meaning of the universe.
Cosmic revelations. So let's go to our newbies and get their first impressions. Emily, do you have any cosmic revelations for us?
I watched it like 2 weeks ago, so I don't remember much, to be quite honest, other than being very interested to hear how much Jessi loved all the time travel.
So we'll go over to Jessi next. Jessi, first impressions.
Well, I have this handy dandy book here.
Yes.
It's called The Science of Time Travel. I've read the intro.
How'd you get that book, Jessi?
Some kind gentleman sent it to me via Secret Santa because he's in Oregon and I can't just run over and punch him in his face.
Some asshole.
Might be the first time Blake's ever been called a gentleman before, but okay.
I called him a kind gentleman. He is a fucking delight.
It's not the first time he's been called an asshole tonight.
But it is the first time he's been called a delight. So there you go.
A fucking delight. So you listen, hot take. I did not like this movie at all. Sorry. Listen. Okay. Everybody prepare yourself for all of the shit talking that you're about to do to me. I did not like this at all. I didn't listen, I'm not a stupid person. At least I like to think that I'm not a stupid person. And I wasn't tracking. I was not fucking tracking the entire goddamn movie. I had no idea what was going on. The characters, the way they looked pissed me off. What did I not like about this? I liked nothing about it. Like nothing, not a single freaking bit. And I don't like cartoons. So I had just a great hour and 700 minutes. I don't know.
Jessi stuck her head out the window and said, "Get off my damn lawn, you damn kids."
I know. God, listen, I wanted to like it. I did, but I didn't.
Justin, how about your first impressions?
I don't know about anyone else, but I fucking loved it. I thought it was actually a great way to wrap up the series. I thought it was a great way to, wrap up the whole War Without End, time travel scenario. So I really liked it. It's, Jessi and I might actually have to have a fist down, drag out fight over this. So
my money's on
good.
me.
It was good.
Yeah, my money's on Jessi.
My money's on you too. You'll beat my ass.
We've now talked about being a delight and fisting. We're doing great. This is wonderful.
Nobody is fisting. No, God, no. Please, God, no. Abort.
Apparently you're talking about fisting, but okay.
Speaking of that, Nicole, first impressions?
Speaking of fisting.
Oh my God. Thanks for establishing me with that. I actually loved it. I thought it was really fun. I loved all the funny little jokes that were kind of put in there about the copyright jokes and the pardoning the turkey and just all the fun little kind of quips that like JMS kind of snuck in there that I thought was really fun. I'm a very nostalgic, sentimental person. So to see some of the characters come to life, even though it wasn't their voices and it wasn't really them, to me, it was like fun and like nice to see like Sinclair and Garibaldi and, all the ones that we've lost. It was fun to kind of see them come to life in a different way. For me, I thought it was really sweet and nostalgic. And I know Emily's going to hate me for this, but I loved the Sheridan Delenn love story. It was so sweet. And I honestly 100% agree. I really feel like just love is more powerful than anything. Like it was just, I don't know. This was right up my alley. And I think you guys probably knew this.
Nicole, have you ever watched Interstellar?
Wait, is that the Matthew McConaughey one?
Yes.
I have not finished it. I need to, but I think I would like it.
You should probably watch that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's go over to our first ones. And like I mentioned, we had already kind of talked about this a lot. What I would love to hear from you all, along with your first impressions, is how you feel about B5 coming back after a long hiatus, and how that kind of worked for you or didn't. Mike, what do you got?
Oh man. I will say this. I enjoyed watching this more the second time than I did the first time. I remember the first time I really liked the fact that B5 came back in concept, but I believe my overall impression was that I didn't really feel like this was a necessary addition to the series. But I don't know. I'm still a little bit in that camp even now.
Kevin, what do you think?
Well, I did not remind myself what I said about it when we reviewed it from a year ago, and I have watched it 2 or 3 more times since we reviewed it. So it's very possible that my view has, shifted a little bit, but I do like the animation. I know we expressed some misgivings about it, but overall I do like the animation and the voice work in this, and it is great that they brought back characters that otherwise they would not have been able to had unless they recast the parts, and I'm glad that everyone was okay with that. I think it's great to have more Babylon 5. I hope they will do some more, and this is a great vehicle to do so. There are some aspects of it I'm not super wild about, and overall I'd say I'm about a 7 out of 10 on it, I would say. But I think it's great that we've got new Babylon 5 to chew on, and I hope it means that we're going to see some more. It's been a year since this came out. My guess is it was not only fairly well received, but probably had some good numbers on it. But I haven't heard anything else. I'm not sure anyone else has, but overall, I like it.
Blake.
So as I recall, I wasn't actually on the original round of the review. I can't remember where I was. I was off traveling somewhere, but I do like the movie. I think it was a great vehicle to bring Babylon 5 back in an animated form because it let them do the recasting. I think if they would have done this live action, there would have been some issues with recasting those characters. But doing it through voice work still, I think, was a nice blend to let those characters come back into this as an animated show. But it also opens up the possibility. I mean, we heard about there were 2 projects. I mean, you mentioned, Scott, we'd heard rumors about various projects, but we'd actually heard about 2, Project A and Project B, one being what JMS was calling a reimagining of Babylon 5, and then this that involved the original cast. And the way this ends, to me, really sets up, even though JMS denies it, and we've all heard JMS's denials about other topics, and depending on the day and his mood and the alignment of the stars, his explanations shift. But the ending of this sets up that reboot and reimagining very nicely. I also think that this is a great medium by which they can explore some other stories, because they tried this before. This was the original idea of Lost Tales, was supposed to be these pieces that followed the various characters. And due to budget issues and other problems, it just never came together to what JMS wanted it to be. But with this animated version, I think they can go a lot further, and they can get into some of the topics and some of the other issues should they choose to do more of these. My only main criticism is I liked most of the voice work, and Scott, I mentioned this to you, I did not like the Delenn voice acting in this one. I think the person who did it was trying too much to emulate Mira to a point that it, to me, didn't work, and that's like my one complaint about this entire thing. But overall, I liked it. I thought the visuals with the animation of the station in particular were absolutely incredible. And the just overall storyline of it and the way it picked things up and set things up for either continued adventures in a new continuity or even going back and telling other stories from within the main Babylon 5 universe.
Yeah, and the first thing that JMS kind of showed us was that first image of B5 in animated form, and I think it's the best the station's ever looked. I get that the animation's a little, it's not hand drawn, but it's also not CGI. It's kind of in the middle there, And I think WB kind of does that for a lot of their movies, especially like the DC stuff. So if you like that or you're used to that, it's fine. If not, I can see that it's off-putting. But for me,
you mentioned DC. It is reminiscent of some of the Batman animation. It really is. As a fan of some of the Batman work, very similar styles.
Yeah, and it came out of the same studio.
It gave me a lot of the old Batman animated series vibes.
Yeah. And so with me, to Blake's point, we had been hearing a lot about this secondary project, this Project B, which he actually changed to Project A when it became something that was going to come out sooner. But most of the year he was kind of building up to this, I assumed it was a documentary, because it's really hard to get something going with all of this cast, especially as Blake pointed out, we've lost a lot of them, and it takes a lot of money. But the fact that it's animated makes perfect sense, because you can do things like that. I think back to like the Star Trek animated series. They couldn't afford to do a show anymore on the sets, but they did an animated series for a season, which was not that good, but it was what they could do with the budget that they had.
It also gets you around the aging issue, because let's face it, other than Claudia hasn't aged, but the rest of them, frankly, were 30 years past the series.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the other thing too. JMS made it very clear when it comes to the voice acting, because you're recasting some very important people. Jerry, Mira, Steve, they're just not there anymore. And of course, Andreas. And with that, he went out to the original cast who were still with us and said, if anyone has any problem with recasting our friends, which is what he said, then we won't do it. And every one of the original cast who are a part of this were fine with it and felt that it was a good homage to the people that they had lost. And I think for the most part, they did a really good job. I'll say the guy who did Garibaldi was really good. I also liked Zathras, who was another one. Actually, Zathras also voiced Sinclair. But yeah, I agree. The Delenn one was the one that was hardest for me to get behind. Also, the Jakar one was not Andreas, and I could feel it's not Andreas, but it's okay.
That was the one that to me felt like he was trying really hard to be Andreas, and you just can't.
See, that was the one I thought was the best of them.
Really?
Wow, really?
Yeah. I liked Andrew Morgado's delineation of Jakar. I thought it was strong.
I did not.
Yeah, I can't get behind you on that one. The one I laugh at is Stephen Franklin was Phil LaMarr, who Phil LaMarr is like one of, if not the most prolific voice actor of our generation. And what's funny is I don't feel like he particularly does a lot to mask his voice in the different works that he's in. If you watch a lot of animation, you can pick him out like that, just like John DiMaggio and some other guys that circulate through animation these days. But the thing that was really kooky to me about this is that I felt like Franklin has the same quality in his voice as LaMarr did anyway. And so I felt like it was actually like a really natural fit.
Yeah, that kind of bassy kind of voice.
Even and it has kind of an almost operatic quality to it.
I thought he was the best one.
Yeah.
And I realized as I was listing out the cast we have lost, I said Stephen as opposed to Richard, because I just assumed
Stephen Franklin. I think I just did too. I'm blaming you for it.
So Richard Biggs is the person we lost as well too. So now that we've kind of discussed the overall piece of this, and also too, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is this actually did really well, believe it or not. And when it came out, it was #1 seller on Amazon for Blu-ray. And from what JMS has said publicly on his accounts, it was doing much better than WB had even anticipated. They had assumed that there was going to be a certain amount of soul cells and that was going to pay for the budget and then make a profit. And that basically was surpassed initially when sales first started. So WB was very happy with this. What does that mean for the future? Well, JMS has said that he has other ideas, But the thing is, we didn't actually know about this project fully until a trailer came out. So we probably won't know if another one comes out until they've produced it. And at that point, we'll see what it is. But hopefully they do something down the road. Blake, what do you got?
Well, and not even just financially, but even the reviews on it. Looking at Rotten Tomatoes had it at like an 84%. IGN gave it, I think, 7.5 out of 10 stars, and other review sites. So it not only financially worked, it had the ratings that backed it up too.
Well, now that we've talked about the project, let's dive in. And what we'll do is here, as Sheridan bounces through time, we'll hit on each of these scenes and discuss what we want to talk about with each of them. So first off, we have a little bit of an interlude before the time travel starts and before Jesse's mind explodes. And that is when Sheridan and Delenn are on B5 before Lanier does his thing, and then moving on to Minbar before the power plant comes on. So anyone want to talk about our moments with Sheridan and Delenn before this fun starts? Nicole.
I thought it was pretty funny and very human that he was superstitious about his lucky socks. That really made me laugh. And I just thought that was such a great element to put in there because, it just shows it was very humanistic. So I thought it was really cute.
And he went through the entire movie without having socks on. That sucks. Emily.
Okay, something about the sock thing just irritated the hell out of me. Like that. Do you know where my socks are? And I think it's because as a mom, I am constantly asking, do you know where this is? Hey, I can't find this. I can't find this. I'm like, oh my God, use your fucking eyeballs. Just please. Have you looked? Have you actually used your eyeballs and looked at what's around you?
If you'd like to nominate Emily for Mom of the Year.
It hit that trigger and I was like, that motherfucker needs to find his own goddamn socks. It was
moving sucks. So
it was a very outsized reaction to what was actually going on in the story.
I'm sure it was the sock issue and also that it was Sheridan. So already you're gonna go ahead and hate him.
Emily, I thought for sure it was gonna be I didn't read the press release. No one reads the press release that you were gonna zero in on, but nope, it was the socks. Okay.
I have a friend who works in communications, and they watched this show with us, and that was the moment that they texted me and said, "Ha! It's so true. No one reads my press releases. No one." Jessi, what do you got?
Emily, let's just head out now. Call it a day, because I don't see us adding anything of value to this entire.
Sounds good.
I think that Emily always adds value to the Sheridan hate, and I'm looking forward to hearing time travel conversations with you, Jessi. So I think you both need to stay.
I think me and Jessi should just bounce out so we can free the titties and be done for the night.
You just had every male listener and some female listeners just perk their ears up going, what show is that? Where does that happen?
A good number of our listeners are like, do it. Just go right ahead.
Free the titties. It's our podcast. Hello.
That's when you need to hit that bell icon on YouTube, just in case. No, not really, but
wow.
Enjoy. So as Sheridan doesn't know how a power plant works or how tachyons happen to work, he does get shoved into the first of multiple timelines and multiple universes that he goes to. And the first one is he jumps ahead to the future for him, where he jumps into Stephen Franklin's classroom 23 years in the future. Nicole.
Well, it confirmed that he does die in 20 years, which made me sad because Franklin said, I didn't have the heart to tell him it was 23 years after, and he was already dead. And that kind of that broke my heart a little bit. And that did confirm that he only has another 20 years. So that was kind of a bummer. But it was fun to see Franklin teaching.
Yeah, I agree. It's with what we've discussed kind of beyond the rim. And you guys haven't had the opportunity to really discuss it too much, is of all of the folks who have an ending that we get to see, and I think it's kind of obvious now when you see where these two are, Franklin and Garibaldi have good endings. They both are able to get past their bullshit and find themselves in a better place a couple decades down the road. We don't hear much from Garibaldi. But with Franklin, he's teaching. He seems to be doing well. Garibaldi's there, so he's doing okay. But yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me that it was Garibaldi that came to Franklin, like that they were kind of in the same place. And like you said, Scott, it was kind of comforting to see like, okay, their lives ended up okay. And I'm glad to see that they were still friends. Obviously, they're both still alive and they seem to be doing okay. So I just didn't expect it to be Garibaldi. I thought it would have been like Ivanova or somebody else. So that was kind of a surprise for me.
And then we flash over to the year that Sheridan took over B5, and he's in a cornfield hanging out at his old parents' farm, which is where I think probably Jessi's mind started going, no, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan.
100%. I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then this thing opens up and he gets sucked out, and it just kept happening over and over and over.
Nicole?
I thought the cornfield scene was really sweet with his dad. And I really thought it set up kind of like what he needed to do in order to get home, essentially, like him having that conversation with his dad and telling that story and stuff. It was like kind of like our way of knowing what he needs to do. It just took him a while to figure it out. Also, it reminded me of the Superman movie with Henry Cavill with the farm. It reminded me of that too. I know that's not related, but I just had to throw it out there.
Something Christopher Reeves had a better farm. Hate Man of Steel so
Oh, it's a terrible movie. I just like looking at Henry Cavill.
Exactly. That's the whole reason to watch it.
Jessi now, by the way, since this is an audio podcast, has stuffed her head in the history of time travel book. She's done.
Now's a good time to tell the story about how it's going to do a spinoff of our podcast while reading each chapter. And I read the intro in the first chapter and realized I wasn't recording. So I never picked the goddamn book back up.
I've only that happened to me twice in all the times I've been podcasting, and it really does suck, right, Kevin?
It was the worst.
I just love that present for Jessi has been so useful.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Really, what you've done is you've deprived our listeners of the fact that you've figured out time travel. Like you cracked it after reading the whole book and gone back in time, and that's why two of our hosts aren't here anymore.
Okay, moving on.
Well, as the big glowy thing, as Jessi says, sucks Sheridan in, he finds himself now on Zahadum when the Icarus shows up, which is the first time we have seen this part of canon. We've heard about it a lot. We've heard about both Morden and Sheridan's wife were on Zahadum and on the Icarus when it was destroyed. And as we know, Mr. Morden comes back from that. So this is a nice little area where we just didn't get to see this before. And also it's the first time we see the shadows in animated forms, which I'm sure folks may have some thoughts about. Blake, what do you got?
And that's exactly what I was going to comment on, the animated form of the shadows. And I'm sure in the original series, we talked a lot about there were budget issues, there were technology issues. B5 as it was kind of at the leading edge of some of the technology of what they were doing. So I really liked what they did with the shadows in this animated version. They gave a little bit more to what they could do outside of their ships. So they had the shield things they were able to shoot. They had weapons that they were able to shoot. And even as we'll see later in some of the other scenes, I know we're not there in the discussion, but even the ships had a little bit more movement to them and a little bit more fluctuation to them. So I liked the revamp of the shadows personally. And I think it falls in. There were other subtle redesigns too, like CNC on Babylon 5 had more windows and was a little redesigned. The White Star Bridge had the same thing. So I was fine with it.
Kevin.
Did anyone think it was weird that nothing related to Anna came up in that scene? Because I thought it was a little bit.
I thought the woman's voice was her that he heard.
Yeah, but they never really called it out or made it clear. I kind of assumed that was a possibility too, Nicole, but I felt it was a little strange that never really came up during that scene. It would have been interesting for Sheridan to be like, hey, is Anna there? Anna, it's John. I can't explain how I'm here, but please do not go in there or whatever. And I don't know whether that would have been a sweet moment or whether that's just fan service stupidity on my part, but I just felt a little strange.
It's funny you say that because I actually had a slightly different take. I didn't even actually think too much about the fact that his former wife was there, but I was thinking in watching this the second time through that it was such a miss to not include Morden in an encounter between John and Morden in the whole kind of dichotomy or dynamic of like Sheridan just vehemently hating that man's guts and Morden having no idea why because he hasn't been shadowfied yet.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So that's interesting.
Your version actually makes more sense.
And I kind of assumed what Nicole assumed, that the voice in the city that was being broadcast was Anna, or at least somebody on that science team, and that Morden's probably in there too. So that's where those characters are. For me, it didn't really stand out that he didn't speak up. And I don't know if it was the first time I watched it or later, so I kind of have more context, but one of two things. One, he's pretty discombobulated as he's bouncing through time. So, and in this scene moves very quickly where he's like, oh, this is where I'm at. Oh, crap. And that's about it. But also, John has moved on from Anna. And he's actually said in season 5 that he has put that in his past and he understands the loss and that he's moved on to having Delenn. Now, that being said, I mean, it makes perfect sense to, try to save somebody regardless if you've moved on from him or not. But to me, I don't think it would pop in his head so quickly as he's just being overrun by shadows and being zapped to the next place.
Yeah, except that, as Mike points out, it would be the shadowfied Anna. And I would just have thought that would have been top of mind for him at that moment. But
see, I guess for me, it's almost more a question of what I almost look at this whole scene and go, all right, as a narrative, you chose to come to this point in time, this location. What was the point if not to have him encounter one of these two former very direct relations? I mean, I get that's the rising of the shadows, I suppose, is the point, but it feels like a real miss to skip the more human connection.
Yeah. I think the main reason, in my opinion, of this is JMS is also writing this as a movie that hopefully, and I don't know if it did or not, but hopefully non-fans will take a look at it. And so you need some background because the next scene you're going to have the shadows overrunning the station and you need to know where they came from. So I think that's why it's here. Blake?
I would agree with that's kind of the setting up the next part just to give the background to the shadows. But also the whole idea of everywhere that Sheridan tracks through here, he ends up on his family farm. He ends up here with Anna. It's things that he's drawn to. I mean, the title is Road Home, and that's kind of the theme. This is pulling events and places from Sheridan's life that he's being pulled to and jumping into across different times and universes. And I think even without necessarily seeing Anna, for longtime fans, we know what the scene is and we know what the scene signifies. But Scott's absolutely right. For new people coming into this or just watching it, it works just fine for a setup without going too deep into the lore that the rest of us can question that have watched this show umpteen 100 times.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Blake, since you said that, I was kind of also thinking that too, about how like each place that he traveled was a significant part of his life or like a significant milestone or moment or something that happened for him or something he really cared about. So as we learned throughout the episode, that is accurate, but like it was really interesting to see all the places that he ended up because I think he, there was a reason he ended up at those places. The road home, I guess, is the reason, but these are all places that were significant to him in a way. So it was really interesting to see it kind of play out on screen and it culminate to him kind of figuring out that he needed to visit all those places to kind of get where he needed to go.
Which brings us to the next jump we do. And this one finds, again, the shadows again. Sheridan is on B5, and it's a B5 that he did not take command of. Sinclair is in charge and leading the effort to stop the shadows from showing up and taking out the station. And I think this is probably one of the longer vignettes. We get a lot of stuff going on here with Sheridan interacting with Sinclair, with Garibaldi, hearing Ivanova, and then, of course, dealing with the station destruction with Lita and Jakar. Nicole, what do you got?
I actually really loved this one. I thought it was really cool to kind of see how they played so many important pieces of the show into this with like Ivanova's last call over the intercom that we saw in that one episode where we were hearing it and she was hearing it. And it was really interesting that they were able to take pieces of what we've seen and interact it and play it out here. So that was really fun to see. It was fun to see him interact with Sheridan and Garibaldi or Sinclair and Garibaldi. They had no clue who he was. Can you work this gun? And then you're like, nice guy. What was his name? I forgot. Like it just made me laugh, you know. But it was fun to kind of see because again, Sheridan and Garibaldi in that episode were fighting them off as they were breaching the hull. So it was like Sheridan kind of inserted himself in that scene we've seen so many times before. So it was really cool how they interweaved everything. And I just thought it was really, I mean, obviously it was a terrible ending. Everyone dies, but it was like, it was really fun to kind of see that. And then like Lita and Jakar were like a duo and like they had a blaze of glory and pulled that switch. It was just so exciting. I really enjoyed that vignette.
Mike?
Boom tomorrow.
Zaha boom.
You know, looking through the IMDb, I was going to say, I swear this was a Shady Keffer appearance as well. They just credit him as Star Fury pilot, but I'm like, that has to have been Keffer, right?
Which like, JMS used the ability to kill him twice, is what happened.
Totally.
Yeah, for me, I really enjoyed this one too because it gives us more time with Sinclair, which is always nice. Again, we haven't seen him since season 1. And Nicole, to your point, I love how they tied into War Without End and Babylon Squared and having to deal with that Ivanova transmission that really is almost word for word. The only thing, and this is my Kevin fanboy moment, the only thing I didn't like because it wasn't there was the Garibaldi aping aliens and shooting and saying, you want a little, you want some, you want some, you want, that's, I wish that would have happened too, because that scene is fun. Mike.
So I'll be the bad guy here and say, as much as I do like this whole sequence, I thought it was a lot of fun. I do feel like my one thing that bugs me is that I didn't understand the characterization of Lita after rewatching the whole show, and especially through season 4 and 5, and now arriving at this, because the Lita that we see here is badass action force Lita, who I think maybe fits closer to the Lita that we just watched at the very end of season 5, like after 3 levels of bullshit and trauma. But at the point in time when we're seeing her now, that was not her character. And so, granted, it's an alternate timeline and things must have gone very differently for her. It's all I can say. But it was a little strange to me.
Blake?
Well, I think that's it. This is a different timeline. This is not the Lita that we had that necessarily left Babylon 5 and went and fell in with the Vorlons and had all sorts of shit done to her. This was Lita who stuck around on B5 and was there through a command of Sinclair and took a totally different path. So for me, it still worked. It was Lita becoming a badass without having to go through all of the shit and radicalized hippie orgasms that we saw through the rest of the series.
Well, it's just weird.
Which, Mike, you are the guy who usually does the argument of nature versus nurture. So,
Mike, are you saying you just wanted Lita to have the radicalizing hippie orgasm?
I felt like Lita went through a very long character journey in this show to arrive at the point where she was strong and confident and badass. And so to kind of like hit the rewind button and like rewrite her history and then have her arrive at the same conclusion minus the trauma that we know of, because who knows what she went through. We don't know, alternate timeline. But it felt a little awkward and cheap. It didn't ruin the scene for me, but it felt a little weird.
Kevin?
To me, I think it speaks to how things might have been different if A, she was not altered by the Vorlons, and B, if Sinclair had been there, which is really an indictment of Sheridan, but he was the one that did not treat her well among some others, and I don't feel like that would have been true with Sinclair. So I think it works the way that it was, that if if Sinclair had been there, I think things would have been a lot different for Lita.
Well, after they do Boom Tomorrow or Boom Today, we then shoot off to Earth. Oh, no, we don't. We go to B5 again. And this time we find ourselves in Lockley's bedroom. Because, we have to have a bedroom scene in every episode of Babylon 5. and this leads us to Epsilon 3 and meeting the Zathras. Nicole.
So I have a question about this. So when he ends up in Lockley's room, that was like current day, like, because she was like, "Aren't you at Minbari? Why are you here?" Okay, so she takes him to Epsilon 3, obviously, which was pretty fun. And all the billion Zathrai, that was a Zathrai overload. Zathras was just as obnoxious as before. The Zathras, like I was, and it was so funny how like he like said not the one and just completely dismissed Lockley. She's like, "Can I hit him?" Like, and he was like, "Told ya." So it was just really fun to see that kind of dynamic.
My favorite. Go ahead, Kevin.
I thought the voice actor that did Zathras was very good. I especially thought that he captured the voice without sounding like he was trying too hard.
My favorite line from Zathras was when he turns to Sheridan and goes, "You brought her, right?"
Yep.
Jessi.
I lied. I actually enjoyed this one.
Yay!
Yeah, this is Zathras. I mean, Zathras is my favorite, like probably of the whole series. So, I did enjoy this plot, and that's all I have to say about that.
Blake.
I was agree. Some of the best lines in this were from this whole scene. One with the, you brought her, right? But also the lost in, no, copyright. Still very strong.
I wrote that down. Yeah.
Which we have Bill Mumy in the movie, so that works out even better.
Yeah, because it's not only a Lost in Space thing, but it's also a Rocky Horror Picture Show thing too. Because to say Lost in Time and Space, but yeah, that whole thing. One of my favorite lines from The Simpsons is "Shh, want to get sued." And that always reminds me of that when they do this kind of thing. But I thought it was very funny.
Nicole.
Yeah, I gotta say that it was like a very fourth wall moment kind of thing. Like, oh, can't say that. Like, it just really made me laugh. And I thought that was really clever to kind of sneak that in there. And how he almost said it a couple times. He's like, "Oh," like it was a funny, tiny little thing that was just, you had to catch it. But if you did, it was a good laugh.
And this is the point, too, where we start getting to know what is actually going on. Zathras points out with his little screen that Sheridan is bouncing through multiple universes, but because he is not a part of any of those universes and bouncing around, it will eventually cause the end of all of the universes. So we definitely got more stake in terms of what's going on and how that could potentially end things. I don't know if anyone liked that or didn't like that, if the stakes were too high or not enough. I don't know.
This is a very dense story. There's a lot of temporal mechanics with time travel, and there's quantum physics, and there's really heady stuff in it. So if and not all B5 gets quite this heady. So I can see not being super wild about it. As it is, I think it's pretty good, but I don't super love the whole thing. But I think it's a fantastic vehicle for bringing us more B5, and I'm still really hoping we're going to get some more.
Could sure use some telepath wars, that's for sure. And so then we move on to Earth, hanging out with Ivanova and Londo at the end of the world. Nicole.
Yeah, I want to know more about how Ivanova and Londo ended up together and hanging out. Like, that was an interesting combination. Again, another unexpected pairing that you wouldn't typically see. It was interesting and it was funny, but definitely unexpected. And it seemed like he was, the Londo we first saw in Born of the Purple, like the drinking and the partying Londo and the, whatever. But I know he said he was sent there to make a deal with Earth or something, and then he got stuck there or whatever. So, but that was really interesting to see them together in that dynamic. And it was also kind of crazy to watch the moon destroy the Earth.
The moral of the story is Londo always gets shit on. Kevin.
Well, I thought the moral of the story was if you wish cast it all and start to think, well, maybe the Vorlons aren't so bad, this kind of puts a nice little exclamation mark on the point that the Vorlons are just as bad as the Shadows, and they're complete assholes.
Well, and we
Sore
saw
losers.
that. We saw that in season 4. They were taking out planets. But I love the fact that the Vorlons are not only sore losers and assholes, but they're cheap assholes. We're not going to waste the energy to blow up the Earth. We're just going to blow up the moon. It'll be a lot easier. I enjoy this scene a lot because, again, just putting Ivanova and Londo together and just their banter back and forth, and the fact that both of them have a morbid sense of humor. Ivanova talks about death a lot in the show, and Londo foresees his own death at the first episode. So the fact that these two are watching their lives end on a balcony sipping wine is kind of perfect.
Yeah, this was really funny because I didn't really that fact of how similar the two characters are in that way didn't really ring true to me until I watched it this time. And I had to ask myself, like, why on earth did they put Londo and Ivanova together in this scene? And I thought it was kind of interesting because thinking back on the show, I'm trying to remember what other times, when we've had these different kind of odd character pairings that work so well. When did we ever get really good Londo and Ivanova vibes together? This might have been one of the first ones.
That's probably why JMS did it. He's like, I would like to see these two characters go at it, and I haven't done that. I didn't stick them in an elevator.
End of the world together.
And for me, this scene hits a little differently. As everyone knows, I had a health scare. Looking at your own mortality when you nearly die is a little bit more morbid. And so watching them joke about it, I'm like, yeah, I can see it. I can see it. Then we go ahead, and once the Earth is destroyed, we move one more jump to the Rim, maybe even beyond it, where we do meet Jakar. Kevin?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say quickly about Londo. I thought the little bit about have a little idea. It's so cute you're there alone. I thought that whole thing was very funny and very Peter to be hilarious like that in a very quick moment.
And that, I think Nicole said it. This felt like Londo sans a lot of the tragedy that had befallen him during the show. This felt like Londo from the early seasons where he would just mercilessly riff on Veer,
Yeah, and that's kind of what Blake gets to, and we see in the last scene is that we get a little bit of a reset on this. We get to have these characters back to where they were season 1. So we'll see if anything comes of that, but it's kind of fun. Nicole.
So when he meets Jakar on the Rim or whatever, at first I kind of really didn't understand what was happening because, again, not a sci-fi person, don't really know. Yeah, I was still kind of figuring out, but by the time it was done in the way that Jakar's character explained, I kind of understood it, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. It took me a minute to kind of catch on. But I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that what he learned there was so profound, love is the strongest thing, and I just thought it was really sweet, and I feel like that moment was kind of necessary to move the story along in a way of again, all these things kept happening and pieces kept happening, and then the light bulb finally goes off, towards the end. So I thought it was a really cool scene once I figured out what the fuck was happening.
Emily, since we discussed love, would you like to chime in here?
No, thank you.
This scene, honestly, I enjoyed it for multiple reasons, but for one, it definitely does hit. Knowing that Andreas has passed away and knowing that in some way in this universe, his soul continues on and he has found some peace is nice for Jakar. And then also, this kind of really does tie into what JMS has kind of hinted on throughout the show. And I think I don't know if it's his personal philosophy, but he talks about it a lot, so it very well could be. And that is that the universe, in his idea, is something that is sentient, and that every piece of the universe is its own self working to understand itself. And so I think that is interesting and an interesting philosophy. And it kind of goes back to like Franklin with his foundationalist and everything else. Like all kind of ties in with that idea.
Yeah, I'll be honest. And it could very well be that the voice of Jakar here bothered me so much, but this was probably one of my least favorite scenes in this whole show. Not to say that the poignancy was lost on me, but just I wasn't in for the like preachiness of it, I guess. Kind of lost interest, zoned out a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's more touchy-feely, which is what Nicole and I enjoy, I guess. But I do like the line, and it was in the trailer. It seems you need a friend, friend. I like that line a lot. And then after we meet with Jakar, we do go to what Blake and I believe is the B5 reboot universe. But Jessi, what do you got?
Oh, I just wanted to let everybody know, just in case you guys were wondering, I also hated that scene. So,
Jesus. So we're back on B5, and we are in a universe where the shadows never happened. And along with that, most of our characters from all 5 seasons are here at this one time. Sinclair and Lockley are on B5 because they're just visiting, which is an interesting plot point. But everyone's here. We've got Veer, we've got Lanier, we've got all of the folks returning. And this is where we have the final scene where Sheridan is saved by Delenn. Nicole.
No one listens to Sheridan. That was I died laughing when he said that. I was like, you talk so much shit about Zathras, and here you are using his line. So I just had to, that really, really made me laugh. It made me snort laugh, to be honest. But I loved this part of the episode because it was so fun to see everybody there, between Sheridan and Lockley and Garibaldi and Franklin and Sinclair and Ivanova. Like, it was just so fun to see all the characters in one place. So I really, really enjoyed that. And obviously, I'm a sucker for love, and I'm a sucker for the Delenn and Sheridan love story. So I thought it was really sweet that that's literally what got him back home. Also, at the very end, when they Sheridan and Delenn of that timeline were in the elevator, and I was like, oh my God, it's a buddy love story. Like, it was just so cute the way that it was tied in. I'm sure if JMS ever heard this, he'd be like, it's not cute, dumbass. But it was so cute to me. Like, I just thought it was so sweet and sentimental and such a way to kind of wrap it up. And like, it kind of proved the whole point of like, love is the most powerful thing in the universe, right? And it just kind of set the stage for that potential love story to bloom on that timeline or whatever. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I ate that shit up. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
Emily, counterpoint.
I think we should all just be grateful I watched this 2 weeks ago, and my mind has since like removed most memories of it. Because, yeah, I was actually annoyed. We'll go with annoyed. That, like, oh, it's all love. Really? No, it's not.
I found myself wondering how much the Delenn in this timeline knows versus, what the Delenn that we know, how much she knew early on about, the shadows, the Vorlons, all that stuff. Because it seemed like when she was talking about stuff, it was kind of with a certain air about, yeah, I kind of know, but I'm not saying anything, which is how she was early on in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of that. I think the actress that played Delenn, Rebecca Reedy, I think I feel the worst for her because Mira's voice and accent was so unique. It's really hard to approximate. And I think she had one of the toughest jobs in the movie, as one of the voice actors to approximate a voice. And it either works for you or it doesn't, but I didn't think it was bad.
Yeah. To your Delenn point, the other point, what she knew, the way I read this scene is the shadows are still out there. It's just that Icarus never happened. So Icarus did not wake up the shadows when it was supposed to. And that's where we were at. Nicole.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. I thought like when they were talking and he was like, "Oh, do you know about the shadows?" No, like she knows. She just didn't say anything. And I almost wonder if she knows about the other timeline Delenn. Like, you know how like the Minbari say like everything's kind of connected? I almost wonder if she knew exactly what was going on with the other Sheridan and Delenn. And like I feel like Delenn knows so much more than she let on in that scene. So I feel like she knew more than she said. Like she was like, oh, like kind of playing dumb in a way.
Want to say she's like, "Hey guys, I have an idea. We're gonna go destroy this planet real quick. Trust me."
Everyone look over this way while the Vorlons blow this planet up. Just let it go. Just ignore it. Nothing happened in that sector. We swear. So
maybe in this timeline the Vorlons and the Shadows are gone already. Maybe they took their ball and left.
Yeah, could be. Lorian, decided to yell at them earlier on than what he did in this one. But once Sheridan flies off with Delenn to the great unknown, because this is the last in terms of media releasing that we have B5 stories, so we don't know what happens after this. But after that, we are still left on B5, even though Sheridan has left, and we're on a B5 again that has a new story. It is our regular friends. We have a lot of people here. Veer is still here and so forth and so on. But it's an area where Sinclair is still not in the past. Sheridan is in command of B5. Lockley is around and kicking. And we leave it there. Blake, I think you have said many times that you have a theory on this, and you did this already with the start of the show. So go for it.
Which theory would that be? That this is the pickup for the reboot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is because everything they said about the reboot was it was going to focus on a younger Sheridan on Babylon 5, where not necessarily getting into the shadows. So I think this is the reboot because this has the younger Sheridan on B5. Obviously, things have changed. IPX went out of business 10 years ago. So this completely changes the board. So if you think back to all the shenanigans IPX was involved in, you don't have infection because IPX never happened. So you don't have the events of infection. You don't have some of these other pieces that happened throughout the first couple seasons with alien tech, but somewhere the shadows would come into play. It would just be a question in this universe, who's the one that goes and wakes their asses up? But I think this is the reset board to open up the possibility to a reboot. Now, one thing they've talked about is the reboot being live action. I could see them reconsidering after this and potentially even consider the reboot as an animated series.
Kevin?
So we don't have to go too deep into this. And yes, I can tend to be a fanboy occasionally. But how are the Minbari still the Minbari if Sinclair never goes back in time? And yes, he could still go back in time just later on or whatever. But it's just interesting to me that kind of like how they kept working Worf into the later next gen movies. I don't care. Just make sure he's there. It doesn't. I really don't care about the why or the how, but it's not an easy prospect to get Ivanova, Sinclair, Sheridan, and Lockley all together in the same room, because why would you need that many heavy hitters on the station? But I'm glad they're there.
You mean Picard walking down the hallway going, "Mr. Worf, what the hell are you doing here? Didn't speak for fucking all of us?"
And then we cut to another scene because even the script writer's like, I got nothing. I got
no answer.
Gotta be here.
Nicole, would you like to talk about Star Trek?
No, I wouldn't. But I would like to make an overall comment on the movie. And I think that for me, it was really fun to just kind of see the different things that could have happened to the characters, or the different realities, or the different ways the show could have went. I think this was kind of a chance for JMS to kind of play with it and like show us different ideas or different, paths that could have been taken or different things that could have happened. And it was kind of fun to just see, the different ways that the characters could have kind of became something different or played out. And I just thought that was really cool.
I think we can go off that and kind of wrap this up. As I mentioned, we're not going to do questions and predictions because, well, there's not really a point at this point. But what are all your final thoughts on The Road Home? Do you think it was a worthwhile effort? Do you think it was enjoyable? Just what are your overall thoughts And I'm going to go to Jessi first because she is shaking her head emphatically.
Listen,
Listen.
I've already pissed off every person that watches our podcast already. So to continue to ask me to give my opinion on this, listen, I'm sure it was great for you guys that watched it, 800 years ago and loved the movie or loved the shows and, buttholes, but it's not my thing. And I grew up watching cartoons. I grew up watching like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Rescue Rangers and fun shit. And I just don't. I'm an adult and I love you guys, but I don't love cartoons. Just like I don't really love musicals. So everybody can fucking hate me now. I've pissed every single person that listens to this podcast off at this point. So fuck your cartoons and musicals. Thank you for my attending my TED Talk.
I was waiting for you to say fuck your buttholes too, but whatever.
Buttholes.
And we'll go over to the other resident hater of the group. Emily, what are your final thoughts on the road home?
I feel like I missed the point of it. Like I was watching it trying to figure out what is this adding to the story that we already have. And I didn't feel like it added much.
Mike, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit in that camp with Emily. I overall enjoyed the show. I'm glad that it exists, and I think that I understand it more now for being the vehicle to potentially reboot the franchise. But looking at it from the context of, as an old school fan, how does it continue the legacy of the old B5? And it doesn't really. Is the answer. It's really a vehicle for the reboot, and that kind of just leaves me a little cold on it.
Kevin,
I really don't feel a lot different about it now than when we started the show. I like it pretty well. 7, maybe even 7.5. I think. What did you say, Blake? IGN was 7.5. That's about where I'm at on it. I think that it was great to hear from all these characters again and see more new B5. And as far as this one goes, yeah, maybe the plot is slightly convoluted or maybe a little too heady, but overall I think it's a good effort. But maybe if JMS gets an opportunity to do some more back in this universe, that he'll be able to do some storylines that it will be more widely considered to be stronger by everybody, just because this one felt a little bit different than the B5 from from the 90s.
Nicole.
I could be totally wrong, but I feel like this movie was kind of an homage or like a love letter to the fans of B5. I think it was created for them, like the people who watched it in the 90s, the people who still support it today, the people who just crave more and crave something new. Again, I could be totally wrong, but I took it as like this was for them. This was something to kind of give them something to chew on. And also I like Blake's kind of thought of like setting it up for a reboot of some sort. So sometimes shows that were really popular will do that, where they'll just kind of play to the fans and do something special for them. That's kind of what I felt like this felt like to me.
Jessi.
So, I mean, this is really, I don't know if you guys have already said this. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to most of what we've talked about today. I love you all.
At least she's honest.
I feel like this is the only way you're ever going to get B5 again. Like you can't, everybody's dead. Like more than half the people are dead. And you're not going to have the same B5 and it's going to piss people off. So I feel like really this is one of the only ways you're actually going to get all of the characters ever together. Unless you do like a spinoff where you do like younger characters or, other stuff. So I like Nicole's point about it being nostalgic. It definitely, I can see that was, why I think that all you guys that watched it originally probably loved this because it's, fun.
And Jessi doesn't like fun.
not her idea of fun on this, and I can understand. I mean, if you're not a sci-fi fan, maybe this isn't quite as approachable as we might have liked, only because it is dense, like I said before. But I didn't feel like if you're a a sci-fi fan at heart, but had never seen Babylon 5, it was completely unapproachable. But I agree with Nicole. There was a lot here for the fans.
Yeah, and I think it also too comes down to not only if you're a sci-fi fan, but when you entered this show. For the newbies, you've been here for 2 years. And so this is just another episode in what you've been watching back to back to back. For those who watched the show in the 90s or came to it in the early 2000s, there's been a long break. Even if you count the Lost Tales and Legends of the Rangers and all of that, there's been a long break. So this is kind of a coming home, much like the episode itself or the movie itself. So for that, I think to the point that's already been made, the nostalgia factor, I think, absolutely rings true, more so for those who have had more time to marinate the show and the franchise. So we'll go ahead and end the conversation there. Oh, Blake, what do you got?
So do I get to give my final thought, or
I thought you already did. Go for it, please.
No, Jessi jumped in with hating musicals and all sorts of random bullshit.
So the moral of the story is it's Jessi's fault.
It is, and I think as punishment, we're gonna have to bring some musicals next week when we do Sleeping in Light, and I'm thinking she'd be a big fan of Kinky Boots personally. I think that might be one she would.
I'm actually not going to be there next week. I'm sorry. Hey, sorry to tell you. If we're watching musicals, I'm going to be sick.
No, we will kidnap your ass.
Yeah,
there's no way you're not going there.
But I agree with what's been said. I think, one, there's the nostalgia factor of this. But for me, too, looking at things like Lost Tales, where they tried to come back and do some of these smaller stories after the fact, to me, this is the better version of Lost Tales. It catches us up, even if it's in different timelines and realities, it catches us back up with these characters that we've known and shows us them in different possibilities, in different locations and times. And for me, it works really, really well. And that's what I liked about this one. I think the story writing on this was actually much better than what Lost Tales had. And to even give some of you an idea, Lost Tales, we've heard a lot about the telepath wars. One of the plans for Lost Tales was to show us where the telepath war ended up. But for budget reasons and writing, it just never got off the ground. So I think this is a much more natural successor to those efforts and a great way to show us where this story can be and has been.
Now that Blake has, not been forgotten. Also, if you're wondering and you're playing the home game, Justin had to disconnect early, so we don't have his final thoughts, but I'm sure if you ask him on social media, he can definitely give them to you. So we'll go ahead and end the conversation there. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and add a review and join us on our social medias. I have been Scott, and with me has been
Blake,
Mike,
Nicole,
Emily,
Kevin,
and Jessi.
Thanks, everybody. See ya. Bye-bye.
I hated everything about this. I really did. I'm sorry. I love you guys.
We got that.
I know that we're trying to get to the end of this podcast, and there's only like one episode left. But I swear to God, if it doesn't happen soon, I'm gonna check myself into the grippy sock floor.
Well, we know exactly what it's gonna happen. So,
thank you for listening to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to and watch this podcast at anchor.fm/Grey17podcast or youtube.com @Grey17podcast. We want to hear from you, so join the conversation at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or Patreon. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review where you are listening to or watching this podcast. Grey 17 is not affiliated with, and the podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of the respective copyright holders. They are included here for purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing themes are available from Falling Matter on YouTube.
And what's out there? The rim. And beyond that? The truth.